Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon to get the latest updates.
I'm with Rama Bijapurkar, a well-known thought leader in marketing and consumer behavior, also somebody with a rare quality who speaks freely and frankly, speaks her mind, and Arun Duggal, the chairman of ICRA, an investment and credit rating agency, a subsidiary of Moody's, chairman of Mangalore Chemicals and Fertilizers Limited, and International Asset Reconstruction Company. Both of you, welcome to the Print Debates, and both of you are also alums of the Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad, a subject that we will discuss today. So welcome to the Print.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The subject of debate today is the question of autonomy to the Indian Institutes of Management. That is being discussed these days because ostensibly the Ministry of Education in the Government of India wants to take back control from the IIMs, and right now this is manifesting in a one-year executive degree that the IIMs want in management, in an MBA degree, and the government is saying that no, that they cannot do this, and it must have a 2-year MBA degree according to UGC rules and regulations. Rama, your first comment on that.
I think the relationship between the government, various forms of it, and the IIMs, and I've seen it over 10 years on the board of IIM Ahmedabad and over several more years of watching this unfold. It's a bit like the Sas-Bahu relationship. There doesn't seem to be an end to it. All I can say is that having seen it over education ministers of both hues, both the NDA and the UPA, it is 6 of one and half a dozen of the other. There are, I think, merits on either side of the argument that are being made, but I'm beginning to get the feeling, having talked to the community as well, that this is really symbolic of going back on what was a hugely symbolic change, or not symbolic, which was a huge change, which was the IIM bill. So the IIM bill happened, everybody celebrated, finally IIMs got autonomy. So I think there is some concern that this may be a backtracking of it. I guess as we go along, we will examine the merits of who's got a point and who doesn't have a point on this one-year MBA. But I think that's what everybody's getting upset about.
Right. Arun Duggal, what is your view? You're an IIM alum. What do you think? Do you think that the IIMs have the right to institute their own degrees?
Absolutely. But let me just focus for a minute on the issue of one-year program for experienced professional. I think it's a terrific idea. As a ex-student, I wish I had an opportunity to study in this program after some work experience rather than a 2-year program that I did. Also, like Rama, I teach as a visiting faculty at IIM Ahmedabad. And when I teach, I make sure to have the class which has PGPX and PGP, which is the 1-year program, 2-year program, 50-50. So that the 2-year program students can, they bring a very fresh perspective. But the 1-year program students who are more experienced, they bring another important perspective, which is impacted by their own personal work experience. So I think it's a very good idea to have a 1-year program. It is also a norm in most Western leading business schools. A 1-year program is available. Even in India, ISB has had very successful 1-year program for many years. So I think this issue is to me, it's very clear. It should be there. Now, the second question is who should decide on this? And I think the right forum to decide on that is faculty. of the institute and the board of the institute. And the faculty has the best interest of the institute in mind. The board has overall perspective on the institute, and they are the ones who should decide whether one-year program should be there or not. And nobody else needs to get involved because nobody else has any value to add.
I should have said this earlier. Both of you are not just IIM alums, but as you just said, Mr. Duggal, you are visiting faculty at the IIM Ahmedabad, and Rama Bijapurkar is a professor of management practice currently teaching at IIM Ahmedabad. So Rama, can I ask you, when you teach your students, do you think that, you talked about this IIM Act that came into being 3 years ago, and greater autonomy was given to these 20 institutes. And remember, at the time, when the minister in question at the time was Prakash Javadekar, before him was Smriti Irani, and there was a big tussle between them. Smriti Irani did not want to give the autonomy. Prakash Javadekar relented. But actually, it was Prime Minister Modi who then came to the aid of the institutes and said, "Ki jitni bhi autonomy chahiye le lo." So what's going on now? What do you think?
Okay, so first of all, I want to completely separate out my teaching hat from my ex-board member and someone who is concerned with governance of public institutions. I think it's the latter hat that talking through a hat is not a good idea, but it's a latter hat that I want to wear as I talk. You are absolutely right that I think the IIM bill happened because the Prime Minister did actually decide that he wanted strong IIMs. He also, I think this is in keeping with his maximum governance, less government. And actually, when we actually saw the way the Act had shaped up, frankly, even those of us who have carped and fought for a long time for the right to set fees, for the right to decide what kind of teaching hours you want, for the right to pay faculty what you feel like paying, and so on and so forth, had very little to complain around this. I sort of get the feeling now, I think the question, and I don't know, I can only speculate, is this the politicians striking back and changing their mind, or is it just the department feeling that, there's a complete loss of power in this whole thing? Because there's also the talk of the HERA, which is the Higher Education Empowerment Regulator. I don't know what happened to that. So I think AICTE had a change in role. There's UGC, there's HERA, there's PMO, there's the department. So this could well just be the department saying, hey, I am going to use this as a basis to come back.
Sorry. When you say department, do you mean the what do you referring to?
I mean the executive arm, the non-political, the executive arm. So I'm not saying bureaucrats because I don't know who else works with UGC.
But are you talking about the Ministry of Education, or are you
the
talking
Ministry?
about...
Yeah, the UGC and AICTE and all that is the Ministry of Education, right? And surround. So I think that this could well be from there. From what I understand, for example, on the one hand, I think there is some merit to saying that if the UGC law says 2 years, and that's what the UGC believes qualifies for a postgraduate, for a postgrad diploma or an MBA or whatever, then why are you seeking exemptions? I think that's a fair comment. If I put my consumer protection hat on, I don't think we want someone who does 3 weeks of teaching to say that you are now going to get an MBA because I'm autonomous. So I do understand that. But here I understand that 20 IIMs have actually got together and through self-governance and well-reasoned argument been able to assign how many contact hours are needed for how much work experience is what I understand. And so if you have X number, 1 year of work experience, roughly it comes to these many contact hours. And that's a basis that has international benchmarks as well. So I think the question is that why would that kind of reasoned judgment not come into the consideration of what the UGC or the department, let's call it the department, is actually looking at? Why is it a diktat? And from what I understand, I don't serve on any IIM boards, but hearsay is that I'm not even sure this has yet been discussed at the IIM boards. So on the one hand, the board is empowered. I just read the Act of 2017. It says the board is empowered to make these decisions. There is also a regulator. So it's obviously down to the interpretation of the law. And I hope to God we don't have the Supreme Court deciding this as well as everything else, because it's already overburdened. They're deciding the coastal road beneath my house. They're going to discuss a one-year MBA program. It's kind of a bit sad. But I think that's really where the question is, because I think the politics haven't changed. I think the Prime Minister has wanted and actually liberated IIMs. I think the big difference between the Javadekar era and the Smriti Irani era was just the tonality of this entire act. And I remember writing and saying that the government has at last done its job. Now, can boards please step up to the line and be adult and learn how to run a class without a class monitor and without having to go back to the government to say, tell me, should I appoint X as director? Tell me, should I appoint Y as chairman? Because it finally got its autonomy to do so. So I'm beginning to wonder, if it hasn't been discussed at boards, then right now it's pie in the sky and we're all speculating. If it has, we would expect the boards to stand up for it, for themselves.
So, Mr. Duggal, that's a good point that Ms. Bijapurkar is raising, is that, so number one, do you think that the Ministry of Education or the Government of India wants to bring back the autonomy question? It wants to sort of dilute the IIM autonomy. And the second is, why doesn't the board fight back? Or why don't the boards fight back?
Yeah, I think very good questions. Rama, of course, is much better, much more knowledgeable about it, because Rama and a bunch of other people were the real fighters in the last 10-15 years.
Yourself included too, I hope.
Yeah, but Rama was on the board, and you know, Rama is Rama. I mean, so
You're going to edit that out, right, Jyoti?
No, I'm not.
Okay.
So, but I want to give a perspective here. This is not the first time this fight is going on. Look at Harvard University. For the first 200 years of its life, it was an average university. It was a public university. State controlled it. On the board was all the bureaucrats and magistrates and the church people, until 1865, when a new act was passed in the state of Massachusetts, which gave Harvard autonomy, and it gave it the scope to then become the top #1 school in the world. And this is the research paper, why is Harvard #1 school in the world? And there are only two things which really make a difference. One is financial independence. The school has to be financially independent. If it is going to accept money from the government or church or whoever, it gets compromised. The second is alumni. The board of directors of Harvard is all 100% alumni. There is nobody else on that board. And they then reappoint more alumni and so on. So I think we are in this journey that Harvard went maybe 150 years ago, and they passed the act in 1865. We did it 3 years ago. So, and whenever these acts are passed, there is a backlash. You have to fight again. You have to make sure that there is no regression. And that's what we are going through.
So, Ms. Bijapurkar, let me ask you your question again. Why are the boards not fighting back?
Well, on this issue, I don't believe, again, I don't know, as I said, I don't sit on the boards. I don't believe it has been placed before the board. I think there are two things. One is that when the matter when matters like this, for example, when Narayan Murthy was the chairman and I was on the board, there was a move by the then MHRD minister, which was Dr. Murli Manohar Joshi, to say that the IIMs should cap their fees. And all proposals from certainly the IIM that I know, which said that we promise a need-blind scholarship program and a need-blind admission program, fell on deaf ears until the MOU was invoked and so on and so forth. And eventually, I think there was some kind of a compromise between the two parties. So there are, in fact, to Arun's point, I want to say that certainly IIMA, and I don't know, but I suspect many of the larger IIMs do not take funds from the government. But I think the government has also maintained, I remember a lovely phrase that was used where someone from the government said, we have an emotional stake in you. Hey guys, we set you up, we're your birth parents. And so we have an emotional stake in you. And we do have someone from MHRD and the government of Gujarat who actually serves on our boards at IIM as well. Boards, corporate governance in India, in fact, and I don't know if I would agree or disagree, but I think that boards in India are also on the journey to their own independence. I also think that there is sometimes an inherent conflict of interest between the fact that boards of IIMs are industrialist heavy, and the industrialists are also, it's a question of putting their own business. Are they willing to put their own business in jeopardy by fighting the government in order to preserve the autonomy of the institution? I mean, I remember...
Give me an example of that, if you can.
I mean, I remember at one time, no, I'm not going to take names, but I'm going to tell you that at one time, Kapil Sibal was both the Minister of Education and the Minister of Telecom. And I can't remember if we did or we didn't have anyone with telecom backgrounds on the board, but that person would be between a rock and a hard place. So the question is that why do we have, on the other hand, I can certainly say that the present chairman of IIM Ahmedabad...
So one second, if you don't mind me interrupting. So when Kapil Sibal was minister, and this gentleman who probably had a telecom business, he was also on the board? Is that what you're saying?
I don't know. I don't think we had someone from the telecom business on the board, but I do remember thinking that if we had someone from the telecom business, because on the board, then are you going to fight on the one hand, or are you going to put your business in jeopardy the other? And I think those days, so there are these kinds of conflicts, right? If you have, I think business in India is generally very respectful of the government. Arun takes the point of America, but I think sometimes the kind of CEO speak you hear out of the US is not the kind of CEO speak you hear out of India. I think we're culturally different. So I can see that there would be a push and there would be a pull there. I think with the new IIM Act, when IIMs can choose their own boards, we've had a large swath of alumni. We've had Shrikant Dattar on our board, who's now the Dean of Harvard. We've had chairman nominated candidates. So as long as it comes to the board itself, I think we have slightly stronger boards today than we had maybe 30 or 40 years ago. I think once upon a time, the boards of IIM and the chairmanship of IIMs went to industrialists rather than educators, because I think the idea was that if this is business education, then maybe jobs can be got for the people who graduate from there. That may have been the logic at that point in time, and we're just continuing with that logic. So it is left to be seen in this case. The last time the board was tested, the boards have been tested, it depended on who the chairman was. I do know that there are certain boards that keeled over and there are certain boards that didn't. I think by and large at Ahmedabad, barring a few exceptions, I think we have a fairly strong chairman who enjoy, I think, good integrity as well as good rapport with the government. If we had a chairman who had a bad rapport with the government, maybe the chairman wouldn't be appointed to begin with. But I think the question of, and this is true on any board, right? That how are you going to manage, and I look forward to hearing from Arun on this, that how are you going to manage your relationship with the government and the tough talk of what you need to do on your board currently. So when this comes to boards for discussion, I think we will know whether the IIM Act has strengthened the boards and made them stand up, because earlier the boards were appointed pretty much by the government. So I think it's to be tested right now. Some boards actually come through better.
Mr. Duggal, the question to you: do you think that if boards have or constitute a significant number of industrialists, and these potentially have a conflict of interest with the government, will they stand up?
I'll just go back to the comment that Rama made, that people in the government, central government, government of Gujarat, feel that they have an emotional connect with IIM because they are the ones, or 50 years ago or whatever, the government supported setting up IIMs. So the government people have emotional connect. Absolutely not. The only people who have emotional connect with IIMs are their alumni, and they have a strong emotional connect. They are the ones who want IIMs to prosper. They are the ones who want their alma mater to be a leader. They are the ones who want students coming out of their alma mater to be leader in business and industry. So I don't think government people or business leaders have a role to play in IIMs because there is no emotional connect they have with that institution. Because they cannot be.
So, as an IIM alum yourself, Mr. Duggal, what do you think IIM Ahmedabad should do, for example, if autonomy were to be diluted, if its autonomy were to be diluted?
Yeah, that's what I was saying, that the journey and the fight should continue. And it's not easy that the act that was passed is a wonderful act. And it is a result of a lot of hard work by a lot of people, including Rama. But that doesn't mean that the deal is done. There will be backlash, there will be some issue here and there. So we have to continue to fight that and push back till the real autonomy happens for IIMs.
Do you think, Ms. Bijapurkar, that the IIM brand could be maybe diluted if something like this happens? You know, it is an international sort of brand now, at the cutting edge of management, education, and research.
Well, I want to tell you that before the IIM bill came in its present form, IIMs were already a good brand despite not having autonomy in any significant kind of way. It always amazes me how much the IIMs do with how little resources in terms of getting their way to wherever they've got to. And people say to me that, oh, it's okay, you recruit smart people when you admit them, and so they're the same people who get out. And I say to them that I guarantee you that if you took a test of people before they went to IIM and after they went to IIM, you would find that they learned something along the way. Autonomy was a gift that was given to us. Whatever we might, maybe our personal views on the political sides of the spectrum we're on, autonomy for IIM was a gift given to us by this Prime Minister and his and the MHRD Minister at this point in time. I think that it came our way and we have to protect it. I don't think the brand of IIM got any better as a result of this. In fact, it was built with whatever shackles it had at whichever point in time. So I'm not overly concerned with the brand, but I think the concern is when you have the autonomy, which is now enshrined in an act of parliament, if you then have attempts to take it back through some kind of interpretation or executive action, which has not yet happened, but which is sort of, as your print article says, where the Ministry of Education has said to the print that they are contemplating doing it. I think people worry that this is not about the one-year MBA program, but it is about the lack of consultation. I think it's pretty much the same issues we have everywhere, right? It is about the lack of consultation. It is about the lack of listening to reason on both sides. And it is that it is the thin end of the wedge or the beginning of the slippery slope, because after that you could go to who you recruit as a faculty. I want to tell you that so far the IIM entrance exam, I think all of us can say with our hands on our hearts, is completely free of any kind of influence. So I think there are lots of things and I think the ability to appoint our own boards, appoint our own chairman, appoint our own directors without going all the way. I think these are all hard-won positives. Hard-won is the wrong word. Yes, we've been asking for it for a long time, but this has been gifted to us. So for that gift to now get backtracked for no particular reason, I think is what worries us a great deal. And I think the one-year MBA is just, one good technical little detail that has been used in this whole thing. UGC says 2 years, you guys do 1 year.
Right. Mr. Duggal, so the question to you, are you worried, are the IIMs worried about this potential sort of threat to take away their autonomy? And the question of influence, why do you think that the government wants to influence these higher education institutions?
First of all, just on the brand, I'm not worried about IIM brand. So long as our admission system continues to be as fair as it has been for ages, no influence, no nothing. I think IIM brand will prevail. It will be further strengthened by having autonomy as to decide, because environment is changing. There are new issues which are coming up that IIMs have to respond to, and it is not possible for people in the government to be totally aware of what does the market need in terms of and knowledge and education from IIMs. So I think we should just represent to the government very politely that benign neglect is all we want from you.
Okay. So let me just open this up a little bit, and we also don't have that much time left. But let me open this up to ask you, Ms. Bijapurkar, the question of control or influence in higher education in India. We've seen in Delhi with JNU, for example, how there has been this attempt to expand influence at the Jawaharlal Nehru University. Do you think that this is something that governments, whether in the UPA or in the current NDA, have been trying to do?
I find that, the IITs have been through it, the IIMs have been through it. I'm not exactly sure. I think Delhi University also went through it. So like I said, there seems to be a Sas-Bahu relationship here. The reason for it I am unable to say, and I characterize it as Sas-Bahu, meaning to say that it will, it's just one of those things that doesn't seem to have got fixed, irrespective of political party and irrespective of minister, irrespective of bureaucrat. I feel that if you have a modern regulator, I think wherever we have to move towards regulators, I think if you scrap any body that was a midnight's child born in 1958 or even in 1988 or whatever it is, and if you replace it with a liberalization child, millennial regulator, I think we might start beginning to see a less adversarial reaction. Otherwise, either side, this debate goes on and on and on. And I think the IITs seem to do a much better job, is my impression from reading everything, the papers, of listening and acting like they're compliant and then doing their own thing. And maybe that's a skill that all higher education now needs to be able to learn to negotiate better. But with the new regulator, if and when the new regulator does happen, I am hopeful.
Actually, I'd like to differ with Rama on this point.
Okay.
16 out of the top 20 universities are in the US. Oxford, Cambridge are the two in England. These 16 universities are doing just fine. There is no regulator in the US to monitor them, to guide them, and so on. Free market in education is what I would say is required.
But why do you think, Mr. Duggal, why has this government, why does it have this adversarial relationship with higher education? I mean, I took the example of JNU, where students are being called anti-national, this tukre gang. I mean, students at this time of their lives are expected to be critical of the establishment. So what is it that upsets the government so much, and why is it that they want control?
I think it is part of the society. I remember students from Presidency College, Calcutta, in the 60s and so on. I'm telling you how old I am. Were called Jholawalas, and they were the ones who were radical and favoring the Naxalites and so on. So long as there will be young people, they will have new ideas. They will those ideas at many times will be not the mainstream ideas, and this conflict will go on as it goes on at home between the parents and children and so on and so forth.
No, but the question was not about the students, it was about the government. Why is the government so keen on expanding control or influence?
I think this government, any other government anywhere would love to have a more control over the society, including the educational institution, because they think that they know best what is in the national interest. And they are the ones who need to ensure that all institutions are working according to that. So it's very instinctive, it's very institutional, it's very historic. So nothing new.
Do you agree with that?
Me?
No, I'm asking Mr. Duggal. Do you agree with this government's view that it should be like a parent? It should have control over its children and therefore students in educational institutions.
I don't agree with that in that sense, but I agree that there will continuously be this conflict between the parents and children and so on. And sometimes the parents are right, many times children are right. So that's part of the whole process.
Rama, you have the last word.
I have the last word. But Arun, there is a regulatory framework that governs every country. So I think when powers get transferred from the government to the regulator, we hope that things get better. The last word, I feel that we should move forward from the 2017 IIM Act, which has been very good for us in many ways. I think boards should step up to the plate, and if there is any attempt to take that back, I think that the boards should, through the mechanisms of the boards, basically show that they are adult enough to be the sole people who provide the accountability for the institution as well as the protection for the institution. And I would certainly want IIM boards which are comprised of people who are still active in business to be able to separate out, as some do, in fact, separate out their business hats from their protection of the institution hats, and say that if you can't stand the heat, then don't be in the kitchen, and certainly don't mess with higher education. Because for those of us who have our children still in this country, I think we want it to work. I think people like me and perhaps Arun, we have come from very modest origins, and I think we have got to where we've got to because we've had quality world-class education. And I would like every child in subsequent generations to be able to say the same in the sunset of their lives like I can today.
Rama Bijapurkar, Arun Duggal, thank you both so much for your time, for explaining this issue to all our viewers. And we do hope, like you, that boards will step up to the plate and that there shall continue to be a free market in education. Thank you both so much for joining the Print Debate.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Rama, I'll just call you.
Yeah, I'm trying to leave. I'm not succeeding. Left. Leave meeting. Okay.